Yeah, so we're going to continue our story in the book of Judges. We're going to continue, just to be honest, we're going to continue our pattern. We've built a pattern so far. Even through just 2 lessons, we have a very quick, established pattern. We've covered quite the characters in Judges so far, even in the first 5 chapters. We've had some kind of decent rulers, some you would expect. We've had some left-handed ninjas going at it here in here. We've even had a woman as a ruler. But, I know, right? Crazy. But they all have one thing in common. Whatever any of the rulers, even some of them, we kind of just, the scriptures just breezed by in a verse or two. One thing they all have in common. They all die. And when they do, we have another thing that comes in common. We have a pattern. They die. What happens next? The people turn away from God. It is a very quickly established pattern. We're up through 5 chapters of Judges. A ruler comes along, first. People disobey. God punishes them, raises up a ruler to deliver them. They live in peace and harmony for X amount of time under God's rule through the good judge. Then that judge dies, and then the pattern seems to start all over. We're going to pick up in this pattern that we established and talk about another judge that comes along in this pattern. Now, obviously, this then, a little aside here, this is not particularly in the lesson, but just a little aside note here. With this established pattern, we establish something else that is quickly realized, and that is, under good leadership, Israel has good times. Under positive leadership, under biblical leadership, Israel sees a time of revival and rejuvenation back towards God. And under the bad judges, they tend to have a time of falling further away from God. So, it is not direct application to what we have today, but and I'm not political per se at all, but I do believe it is important to try to put ourselves under good biblical leadership as much as possible. Even more so than on the national level, which they were, but we can even take this down to a smaller, local level, under local politics, but even beyond that, within our own homes, within our own church, within our own community, within our own jobs. Try to put ourselves under good biblical leadership. Because as leadership goes, so do the people go. And that's just a fact. That's just how it is. That's how God set it up. He set it up in a hierarchical sense. So as good leadership goes, so then the people go in a good fashion. So, side note here, pray for your leaders. Pray for the leaders of the church. Pray for the leaders in your community. Pray for the leaders in your home. Pray for the leaders in your job. And find a way to put yourself under good leadership. And how you put yourself under good leadership is you become a good follower. And again, that's a side note. That's just a kind of a more overarching lesson we can learn from Judges. Maybe not as particular from our lesson here. But that's just an overarching thing we can get from Judges, is the idea that good leadership leads to good followers, and good followers should seek good leadership. So anyway, back to Judges. We're going to talk about one of our most well-known judges here this morning. We are going to talk about Gideon. Show of hands, everyone heard the name Gideon? Anybody in here? Not per se? All right, we're going to go through his story pretty quickly. We're not going to hit as many details of the events because a lot of those have been played. We're going to try to talk more about overarching themes within Gideon's life and in this account that we get from Judges, chapters number 6 through 8. So if you want to go ahead and be there, we're going to try to hit all of 6 through 8 today. We're going to give it a whirl anyway. And so that's where our scriptures are going to be found. So again, if I do not cover it today, every single verse, be sure and go back and read Judges 6 through 8 this week, and go ahead and prepare yourself for the next lesson by continuing reading on through Judges. So, as we go through the life of Gideon, I think the Bible is trying to emphasize 3 seasons in Gideon's life. And those seasons can almost be broken down by the 3 chapters that are dedicated to talking about Gideon. Chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8. Chapter 6 tells us about a season in Gideon's life where he was questioning God. Chapter 7 kind of gives us a season in Gideon's life where he was obeying God. And chapter 8 gives us a little bit of an account, or a little bit more detail about a time in Gideon's life when he was forgetting God. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the 3 seasons in Gideon's life and what we can learn and what we can find out and talk about from each phase and season in Gideon's life. So we start in chapter number 6. Start in Judges chapter number 6. We start with a familiar refrain. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and God delivered them unto their enemy for punishment. Can someone read to me chapter 6, verses 1 through 6? Would anyone like to read? Yes, Ben, thank you.
And the children did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made them the dens which are in the mountains, and caves and strongholds. So it was, when Israel had sown, that the Midianites had come up, and the Amalekites and the children of the east, even they came up against them. And they encamped against them, and destroyed the increase of the earth, till thou come unto Gaza, and left no substance for Israel, neither sheep, nor ox, nor ass. For they came up in their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for multitude. For both they and their camels were without number, and they entered into the land to destroy it. And Israel was greatly impoverished because of the Midianites, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord.
Okay, so we have a very familiar refrain even already. The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and God delivered them unto their enemy for punishment. So who was the enemy this time? Midians, and who else? Yeah, so the Midians and the Amalekites, or however you pronounce that. What did they do? They drove the people into their caves. And how did the Midianites and the Amalekites punish them? How was it? They stole their food. They ran them to the caves, burned their crops, destroyed their crops, and made them, as it says, impoverished. They had no food. They had no sustenance. They had to rely on the people encamping around their enemy to provide for them. They were impoverished. And what did that make the people do? What was their response to this after it says 6 years? They cried out to God. During their low time, we see again the children of Israel coming to God in their low time. I actually didn't even talk about this in my lessons here, but I think it's important to point out. This time, the first thing that God sends is not Gideon. Let's look in pick up in verse 7. And it says, "And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midianites," the first thing that God does in verse 8, he says, "that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, which said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up out of Egypt, and I brought you forth out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drave them out before you, and gave you their land. And I said unto you, I am the Lord your God, fear not the God of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, but ye have not obeyed my voice." So the first thing that God does in this instance is not send a judge, not send a deliverer. First thing he does is he sends a prophet. And what is the prophet's message? What's the prophet's message? What does he tell the people?
Reminds them of the good that God had done, and kind of contract that God had set up. Do this, I'll do this.
Yes.
And they failed their end of the contract.
Absolutely. He told them, remember, this isn't the first time this has happened. I took care of the people, took care of everybody in Egypt. I promised you this land, and you need to return unto me because you have forgotten the voice of the Lord. So the first thing he does before he sends a judge, before he sends a ruler, before he sends a deliverer, is he sends a prophet to remind them of why they're in this predicament to begin with. To bring the good news of, I am your deliverer, I am your God. Then he can deliver them after they realize that it is God who is going to be doing the delivering. So, we see that God sends a prophet to pave the way so that there can then be a deliverer be risen up by him to take the people out of their bondage. They have to turn, they have to realize that it is their doing, that it is their going away from God that has caused them to be in this situation to begin with. It wasn't God left them, which we will see in just a minute with Gideon's, when he meets a messenger. It is not them that went away. It is not God that went away from them. It is they forgot the voice of God. And this is why they're in this situation. So then God then turns around. After he sends a prophet to the people, he then sends a messenger to Gideon. And this is in verses 11 through 24. Verses 11 through 24 is the account of Gideon and this messenger. Honestly, we kind of have to read it to get some of the questioning that comes up here. So I'll just read through it real fast. I'll try to hit some of the highlights because, again, we got a lot to cover today. In verse 11 picks up and says, There came an angel of the Lord and sat under the oak tree in Ophrah, which is where Gideon is from, that pertaineth to Joash the Abarite, and his son Gideon threshed the wheat by the winepress and hid it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. So this angel comes and appears to Gideon. Gideon then has a back and forth with this messenger. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is this all befallen us? And where be all the miracles which our fathers told of us? Did not the Lord bring us up out from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hand of the Midianites. And the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent thee? So what's the first thing? The messenger comes to Gideon, says, You are a mighty man of valor, and you are going to be the deliverer. What's his first thing Gideon says to him? Anybody? Yeah, where's God? You talk about these miracles that the prophet has come and told us about these miracles. I've learned about these from a young age. Where are our miracles? Where is our deliverance? And he is coming before, did not the Lord bring us from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hand of the Midianites. Gideon is going through a time where he is struggling with the idea of what God is doing in his life. God gives him an answer in verse 14. We'll talk about that in just a few more moments. He gives him an answer and he says, You're going to be this deliverer. You're going to be this miracle. And then we pick up back in 15. And he said unto him, O my Lord, wherewithal shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. So he says, okay, you're going to be this miracle. You're going to be this deliverer. Gideon has another question for God. What's the question this time? Why me? How am I going to do this? I'm the least in my family's in my house. Why me? How am I going to do this? And so again, he is having a difficult time dealing with this. He is questioning God. He is questioning God's plan here. And we see that God continues to answer. In verse 16, he says, And the Lord, surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man. And then verse 17 says, And he said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, then show me a sign that thou talkest to me. So he first says, Gideon, you are the chosen one. Gideon says, where is God in all of this? And then the messenger answers, you are going to be this miracle that delivers the people. God is going to use you to do this. He says, why me? How am I to do this? He gives them an answer, because I'm going to go with you. And then he asks another question. What's the question he asked him this time? Show me. How do I know I'm talking to God? How do I know this isn't just... How do I know that what I am hearing and what I am feeling and what I am thinking is God's will? How do I know you're from God? Well, it's a detailed, basically he builds an altar. The messenger then burns up the altar, burns up the sacrifice by touching it with the staff. And Gideon believes that this is a messenger from God. We could get into this if we have time another time, by the use of the word Lord and the two different words used for Lord here. Some might even say this may be an incarnate Jesus before he becomes to earth in an Old Testament form. Neither here nor there. Point is, the messenger burns up the altar. Gideon then believes that he is from God. Yes, sir. Yeah.
And the Lord answered. And I think we can fall in the same traps. It's okay to ask the Lord questions. Trust that He will respond. And this is just an example for us to follow today. We can ask God. Me? You want to say me? It's okay to ask.
Yeah. So, I don't know if he was standing up here, but he hit my notes here. Good job. We're going to get into this. No, this is fantastic. We're going to get into this. This is fantastic. This is what we're going to get into. You immediately notice the exchange between the messenger and God and Gideon. The first thing you notice is he begins to question God. He asks God, how am I going to do this? Why me? He begins to ask questions, and he begins to question what God has been doing for them. The messenger then performs a miracle to prove that he was sent from God, and Gideon was good to go. He had all of his doubts answered. Right? Anybody know the story? Does he get all of his doubts answered? No, it does not seem so. In the middle of chapter 6, we see, I'll get into this. We're going to get into the questioning of God in just a second, but I got through the rest of chapter 6. He then tears down the altars of Baal, because the messenger tells him to. These were his father's altars that his father had built. He tears them down. He then the messenger changes the heart of his father, who then hides him from the people who are trying to kill Gideon. And then Gideon is good to go. He has built this altar, tore down the altar of Baal, built this altar to God. He must be good to go. God is on our side. He's ready to fight. Let's go. No. That's not quite how it is. Before he left for war, he famously questioned God again, right? How did he do it this time? Fleece. All right, verses 36 through 40. Skip ahead to there. Verses 36 through 40 says, And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by mine hand, as thou hast said, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the floor, and if the dew on the fleece be only, and it be dry upon all the earth beside, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast said. And it was so, for he rose up early on the morrow, and thrust the fleece together, and wringed the dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. Watch here in verse 39. And Gideon said unto God, All right, let not thine anger be hot against me, but I'll speak this once. Let me prove, I pray thee, but this once will the fleece, let it be dry only upon the fleece, and upon the ground let there be dew. And God did so at night, for it was dry upon the fleece only, and there was dew all over on the ground. So he still had one more test for God. And then he had one more test for God. One more question for God. One more time for God. So that tells me that he was struggling with this idea of what God would have for him. He questioned God. Why? Where have you been? Why am I in this situation to begin with? Why me? How are you going to do this? And is it really you, or is this just me just wanting to do this? So that leads me to the question. Is it a sin to question God? Is Gideon in the wrong here? We've already talked about this. I believe no. I don't believe it is a sin for Gideon to sit here and question God. I believe, let me ask you this. Is there anyone in here that the first time they heard the gospel, this is slightly different from what we're talking about, but the very first time they heard the gospel, ran quickly and immediately fell down on your face before God, realizing you were a sinner? Anybody the very first time they ever heard the gospel did that? Personally, I was years in church before I got to this point. Anybody in here the very first time they were ever asked to teach a Sunday school class, or the very first time God laid it on your heart to witness to your neighbor, the very first time it popped into your head, you just went straight and did it. No questions asked, no hesitation. You just went and did it. Anybody in here that good? No. So we have to consider the idea that there is something about questioning, not questioning God and who He is in an all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipotent God, but questioning how to do that. So does anybody, I would submit that this is the phrase that it came up to. I want y'all to consider this phrase, consider this idea, and open it for discussion and see if y'all have any thoughts or points to this. Is it a sin to question God? I would say it is not a sin to question God as long as that questioning does not lead to disobedience or inaction. As long questioning God is, in fact, I would submit healthy, as long as it does not lead to either disobedience or inaction. Let's look at some examples from the Bible. Can someone give me some examples of other people in the Bible who questioned God, but ultimately did what God would have for them to do? Somebody give me some examples. Say what? Moses. Why not my brother? Why me, right? I can't do this. I can't talk. I'm not very good at this. Am I killing this thing? My battery's dead. Okay, well, I'll just talk louder. Oh, you have a new battery? Knock yourself out. Why? Moses, yeah. Why me? Why not my brother? I'm not very good at this. Anybody else got an example?
Well, I was thinking, Deuteronomy 6, it says you should not put the Lord your God to the test. And even Jesus references that in Matthew 4 as well, when talking about the temptation of Jesus. So it's one of those situations where if we don't like the outcome of what God is maybe where He's leading us, or maybe a decision, we don't want to test Him, right?
Yeah.
Or push back, say, I don't like the response, so I'm not going to trust you in faith. So that's one approach, I guess.
Absolutely. I don't mean to suggest the idea that we question. I think that's in the point of not having faith. There I am again. Definitely, there are plenty of examples of faith in action. Take Mary, when she heard, I'm going to come over you, and you are going to be the mother. Thank you, Lord. She immediately accepted that. Can anybody else give me any examples?
Well,
Yes.
I would say in the instance of Mary, her first response was how
Yeah, how? Even
I
then.
don't understand. And so I think God is very open to us saying, I don't understand this, so that should still accept.
Yeah.
Accept it.
I got several more. Can anybody else come up with any? Yeah.
So I'm thinking when the angel of the Lord was speaking to Abraham, and Sarah heard what was going on behind, she thought she was by herself, and she laughed at him. And right.
Yeah.
And he said, why did you laugh? And then she says, oh, no, I didn't laugh. She's trying to say, no, I didn't. But the fact is, she was more of it wasn't question, it was like, right. It's almost a sarcastic, I did not believe this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, Chance.
I don't know if anybody said Jonah.
Jonah.
These aren't the people.
Well,
They're sending to them.
I actually have him as an example in just a second, but we'll come back to Jonah.
I think this is just another picture of God's long-suffering and mercy. I think we know that the best response is immediate obedience.
Absolutely.
When God is
Long-suffering, yeah. And that's exactly it. It's not a ideal, because we are sinners. We do fall short in our minds, in our lives. We fall short. Peter, you should wash my feet. I'm not going to wash your feet. Well, then you don't have any place. Well, okay, then let me wash it all. Thomas, show me your hands and your feet. David, I'm the youngest in my family. And the list goes on and on and on. And it is a picture of God's long-suffering. God's long-suffering with Gideon and his people, because he wanted to deliver his people. No, let me get that back. He was going to deliver his people. He wanted to use Gideon to do so. And if it took Gideon wrestling with this, coming through this, if it took the messenger of God patiently answering all of his questions and all of his concerns and all of his needs, then that's what they were going to do. God was going to bring him along in whatever way he needed to come along. But the problem is, oftentimes as Christians, and this may be just coming from my background and the church situations I was raised in, questioning God was akin to doubting God in the sense that you have no faith. You don't trust God. If I don't understand, therefore I must not love God enough. I must not, and I don't want anybody to ever feel that they're in that situation. If Dana was here, she would have no problem telling you this, that she struggled early in her relationship with God, early in her salvation, with the idea of, if I don't understand or if I doubt, I must not be saved, because, if I'm a child of God, I would never question God. We train our children, try not to question us, but I guarantee you they are, even if they don't say it to us. I must not be a child of God if I am ever coming against difficult situations. I think of wow, the thought just left my brain. Hang on. Israel. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a strong distinction between accusing God's character and trying to come to know God.
Yes.
Both of those can be called questioning it. When we're accusing God's character, we are sinning.
Yes.
What kind of God would do this?
Yeah.
But when we're asking God to reveal more of himself to us in a questioning way, that's holy.
And the word I want to is wrestling with the situation. Jacob wrestled with God. God changed him into Israel through that difficult physical wrestling in this scenario. But we can wrestle with the things that God would have for us to do. And I believe Gideon was doing that because he ultimately not only did what God would have to do, but did it with fervor and did it with, as you'll see in chapter 7, which we will fly through that. Yes, ma'am. I heard saw a face.
Would you say that that with questioning or a little bit of doubt is just an indication of our sin nature, that ultimately through our sanctification that we'll get better and better and better over our lifespan?
I can't see how it wouldn't be.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking Zacharias doubted, and there's sometimes consequences for this kind of doubt in the scripture. He was unable to speak for a certain amount of time. Jonah.
So
there's consequences, and that through that he sanctifies us.
Yeah. And I think that's where you brought both the examples I actually have here, is someone who questioned or doubted, and that led to them not following what God would have them to do. Zechariah had to be punished because he didn't do what ultimately he was told to do when he questioned God. Jonah did question God, and then he ran away. He didn't do what God wanted him to do. After wrestling with the idea, these aren't your people, God said, it doesn't matter, I'm telling you to do it. And after wrestling with that, he decided to run away and not obey. And then he had to be punished, and again, brought through sanctification back to where he was supposed to be. It is a picture of God drawing us through sanctification. I can't imagine hopefully, prayerfully within our life, we are growing to a point that the wrestling becomes easier because we see that God has fulfilled His promises to us over and over and over. And Gideon hasn't seen that yet. He wrestled with it. He got his answers. And as we see in chapter number 7, we get into a season in his life now where he is obeying God. We go from the idea of questioning, of wrestling with this, what God would have for us to do, but it cannot lead to anything but obedience, or it is a sin. I had an old preacher preach a message one time. It was a five reasons or 5 times not to pray. 5 times not to pray when it is unbiblical to pray. And one of those was when we were using it as an excuse not to act. I need to pray on this a little longer. I need some more answers. I just don't have the peace yet. And we use it as an excuse not to act, not to obey. And Gideon eventually, after some prodding, after some testing, after some wrestling with this, he eventually came to the point where he was ready to obey. And that's where we pick up chapter number 7 of Judges. So Gideon's worries are answered. He and his people went out to defeat the Midianites. Gideon gathered to himself about 32,000 men, and he is ready to go up against this army. This is an act of faith in and of itself. We'll learn later. Does anybody know how many men the Midianites and the Amalekites have? Estimation? You pick it up in chapter number 8, so you hadn't gotten there yet. It's 132,000, give or take. 137,000, I think, actually. 137,000, something more in there. So his little army of 32,000, that takes a lot of faith, takes a lot of action.
Also, the 100,000 Amalekites were well-fed, well-rested, they had shelter, and the 32,000 of Gideon's were malnourished and living in caves.
Yeah, this is who they gather up. These ones that have been in bondage for 6 years under these oppressors. They're living in he gathers up their tents and they go by the river to get ready for this battle. Well, God comes to Gideon and says, it's action time, let's do this, but I have one more thing that I need for you to do. Anyone want to read verse 2 of chapter number 7 for me?
The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into the hands of Israel, or Israel would boast about me. My own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained.
That's fantastic. So God says, no, you're fine. God says, there are too many. I can't do this with this many. That seems to be a counterintuitive phrase that God says. You have too many. I can't do it with this number. Why? He gives his reason why he can't do it with this number. Anybody got it? What was that? It's because Israel would say they did it. I'm sorry, 32,000 against 130-something thousand. I don't care what army you are. If God's not with you, you're probably struggling in this. But God says they still might have a little too much pride. They still might have a little too much thought amongst themselves that they can do this. So just tell everyone who's scared, go home. And we have to remember, as Ben just said, these aren't warriors. These are every able-bodied man that can gather together to try to fight. These are not trained warriors. These are just men who want to come out from bondage because Gideon told them this is what we're going to do. So they're scared. So God tells them to go home. Then, for sake of time, we'll just say he says, that's still too many. You got 10,000. That's still too many for me to get the victory here. Why don't you go down to the river and have them drink, separate them based on how they drink, and send the ones home who don't drink from their hand. And so that's exactly what Gideon does. And what is the number that he is left with? 300 men. All right. So, here's what I want to point out. Those two things that God told Gideon to do seemed absolutely insane to anyone who would hear this from the outside. But Gideon didn't question. He just said, guys, if you don't want to be here, go home. And guys, let's go get a drink of water. You know what? I'm good. You guys all go on back to your families. Take care of them. We're good over here. He didn't question God. It was a time of obedience. It was a time for him to act, and it was a time for God to get the glory through his action. And that's why we wrestle with these things, so that we can then obey and God get the glory. Because if we do it on our own accord, in our own sending, in our own way, we will get the glory. And God was having none of that in this particular setting. All right, so how is 300 going to beat 130 some odd thousand? If you continue reading in chapter number 7, you will see that God can still sense a little bit of hesitation in Gideon. Gideon's not questioning per se, but he's getting a little hesitation. So he tells him, Gideon, to calm your nerves, why don't you do this? Why don't you go down to the camp, sneak at night as a spy, and just listen. I'll take care of it from there. You just go listen to what they're talking about. And if you're scared, take your friend with you. So he still senses that little bit of hesitation, that little bit of fear in Gideon. All right, Gideon, I get it. You're scared. Take your friend with you. And while he's down there, Gideon overhears a couple of these men talking. Verses 13 and 14 of chapter number 7 says, And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow and said, Behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it, and it fell, and overturned it, and the tent lay along. And his fellow answered and said, This is nothing else, save the sword of Gideon, and the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for it is in his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. So to calm Gideon's nerves, God says, go down here. I've already taken care of this. I'm already in their head. And it has to be God in their head, because I'm not getting Gideon defeating the Midianites from a loaf of barley bread rolling down a hill and taking out a tent. There's no other way but God that we are interpreting a loaf of barley bread taking out a tent, that it is Gideon and his sword coming in the name of God. Two things about that. One, how did they know the name Gideon other than God? And how could they possibly interpret this loaf of barley bread coming down a hill, taking out a tent, as that God is already in? They are already defeated. He doesn't say that God, this could mean this. He's saying that God is going to defeat the Midianites. This is a Midianite or an Amalekite or whoever is out there. He knows that they're in trouble because God has told them in a dream. We're going to have to stop, but I just want to get through this. We'll pick up either next week or at some point. So two things, or to finish this off real quick. We know that Gideon then goes back, and how do they actually defeat the Midianites? What do they do? So he has 300 men, right? He takes 3 groups of 100. He gives them clay pots with a lantern in it and gives them a trumpet. So these clay pots, so in some battles, especially ones that would be done at night, these would represent someone leading a group. So the people probably thought there were a lot more than 3,000. They probably thought there were 3,000 groups of people coming. But they broke their lamps, blew their trumpets, screamed, the sword of the Lord and Gideon, and screamed that over and over. It's the middle of the night, pitch black, and the people of the Amalekites and Midianites wake up, and they do what? They start to run and realize they think these people running past them are the soldiers coming in to take their camp. And they lay upon they fight themselves and kill themselves and utterly destroy themselves. And Gideon, the sword of Gideon, doesn't even exist. The sword of Gideon is God coming before him to prepare the way for this thing. We'll talk next week about what happens after this. We do have some retreating and getting away. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Gideon's rest of his life and finishing up. But what I want for us to get today is this idea of diving into who God is and what he has for us, and praying about and wrestling with this is not a bad thing as long as it does not lead us to question God himself, who God is, and as long as it doesn't lead to disobedience and inaction and us just always sitting. God was going to deliver his people. He wanted to use Gideon. He just had to get him there. And it's a wonderful example of God's grace and God's mercy and God's long-suffering that he continues to deal with us as we are being sanctified, as we are being one day glorified. But we are not there yet. But hopefully as we continue in this Christian life, we continue to get more sanctified, as Tina mentioned a few moments ago, that this becomes easier and easier the more we know about God's will and the more we know about who God is and the more God proves himself right every time. And that's what Gideon got to. He had to get there, but he eventually got there, and God got to bless him and his people because of his ability to obey after the questioning. All right, anybody got a quick comment